My husband, Ethan Vance, suffered from severe panic disorder. Whenever his phone rang, he would experience uncontrollable heart palpitations and tremors. Because of this, his phone was permanently on silent. I had been with him for 5 years, and in every single moment I desperately needed him, he was unreachable. When I was sick and called him, the phone only ever went straight to voicemail. On our anniversary, I waited at the restaurant until closing time, but I couldn't get hold of him no matter how hard I tried. He even missed my father's funeral, claiming he hadn't felt his phone vibrate and forgot the time. In the beginning, I had screamed, cried, and fought. But then he would bring out his medical diagnosis, kneeling on the floor in sheer agony, weeping and begging for my forgiveness. My heart broke for his pain, so I forced myself to get used to his constant absence. Until today. I was 5 months pregnant, on my way to a routine prenatal checkup, when a car brutally T-boned my taxi. Covered in blood, I called Ethan 126 times. Every single call went unanswered. Meanwhile, Chloe Miller, my best friend and the driver who had caused the crash, stumbled out of her car in a panic. She pulled out her phone and made a single call. In less than 10 minutes, Ethan arrived at the scene. At that exact moment, the harsh truth shattered my world. Ethan hadn't muted his phone. He had only muted me. "Baby, don't worry. I'm here. I'll handle everything." Ethan comforted a sobbing Chloe, gently rubbing her back before finally walking over to the wrecked taxi. Only then did he notice me, drenched in blood, slumped in the back seat. When his eyes met my bloodshot, wild stare, a flash of intense guilt flickered in the depths of his eyes. He panicked and reached out to check my wounds, but I flinched, dragging my broken body away from his touch. His brows furrowed, an impatient scowl instantly replacing his worry. "Serena, stop throwing a tantrum. This is not the time. Chloe doesn't know she was the one who hit you. You must not tell her. Otherwise, she will be consumed by guilt." I had almost lost my life in the crash. Yet his very first thought was to protect Chloe from feeling bad. I opened my mouth, wanting to scream, to ask him why I was the only one on mute. But a sharp, tearing pain suddenly ripped through my lower abdomen. I felt a warm, terrifying gush of fluid flowing out of me. Instinctively, I grabbed the hem of Ethan's coat. "It hurts, Ethan. Save me. Our baby. I think our baby is." The ambulance, which the taxi driver had called for me, finally arrived, sirens blaring. Watching the paramedics rush out with a stretcher, I dragged myself toward them with everything I had. For my baby, I had to fight, even if it meant crawling through the dirt. But right as my hand was about to reach the stretcher, Ethan stepped in front of me, blocking my path. He pointed at Chloe, who was sitting comfortably in his passenger seat, and spoke to the medics with absolute authority. "That lady over there has a congenital heart condition. She needs to go to the hospital for an emergency evaluation right now." Then he casually pointed back at me. "As for her, she's always been incredibly healthy. She once walked home in a freezing storm for 2 hours and didn't even catch a cold. She can wait for the next ambulance." I stared at Ethan, completely paralyzed by shock. My throat felt like it was swallowing hot coals. Using every ounce of strength left in my lungs, I let out a guttural scream. "Ethan Vance, are you insane? Chloe is perfectly fine. I am pregnant with your child." The paramedic nearby was sweating with anxiety. She knelt down, quickly assessed my condition, and warned Ethan with an urgent tone. "Sir, this lady is bleeding heavily from her lower body. She is showing clear signs of an impending miscarriage. Her situation is extremely critical. She must go first." Yet there was not a single hint of pity in Ethan's eyes. He didn't even look down at me. His voice was freezing cold and unyielding. "I know my wife. She has a strong constitution. She can hold on. I am her legal guardian and husband. If anything goes wrong, I will take full responsibility." Having no choice, the paramedics had to follow his orders. They pushed the stretcher toward Chloe. They carefully secured her inside. The ambulance siren wailed again, cold and piercing. Ethan followed her in. Right before stepping into the vehicle, he finally threw a pitiful glance back at me. "Serena, just wait here. We'll meet at the hospital later." I froze on the wet asphalt, my body turning cold as ice. Every breath I took felt like inhaling glass. By the time the second ambulance arrived, the pain had pushed me to the brink of consciousness. Inside the emergency room, a nurse ran around frantically, holding a consent form. "The patient is hemorrhaging. We can't save the fetus. We need to perform an emergency DNC procedure immediately, or she will go into hemorrhagic shock. Where is her family?" But at that moment, Ethan was in the VIP wing, keeping Chloe company during her full body scan. The hospital intercom blared over and over. "Will the family of patient Serena Vance please come to the emergency room immediately to sign the surgical consent form?" The announcement echoed clearly throughout the entire diagnostic building. Ethan froze. He instinctively stood up, an ominous feeling creeping into his heart. He took a step, wanting to head down to the ER to check on me. But before he could take another step, a warm, delicate hand tightly grabbed his wrist. Chloe leaned weakly against the back of the chair, her voice trembling with tears. Ethan, my chest feels so tight. Please don't leave me. She looked up at him with tearful, puppy dog eyes, though a malicious glint flashed in the dark. Besides, Serena is a very common name. It's probably someone else. Serena only went for a routine prenatal checkup today. Why would she need emergency surgery? The hospital must have made a mistake. A few simple, groundless words were all it took to put Ethan's mind at ease. He gripped her hand back, squeezing it reassuringly. You're right. It's probably just a coincidence. Don't be scared, I'll stay with you. Down in the emergency room, the intercom kept calling my name, but my husband never showed up. The nurse was drenched in sweat. Seeing my bleeding grow worse by the second, she knew she couldn't wait any longer. She leaned over and looked at my deathly pale face. Ma'am, we can't reach your husband. It's too dangerous to wait. By law, in an emergency, the patient can sign for themselves. Can you hold a pen? Waves of agony tore through my abdomen. I forced my eyes open, and with the absolute last drop of my strength, I scribbled my name on the paper. The surgical lights were blindingly white, casting a cold, clinical glow over my freezing body. My baby is leaving me. My heart shattered into a million pieces. At that moment I knew. This man, this marriage, I was done. I didn't know how much time had passed before I finally woke up. When I opened my eyes, the room was empty. My phone buzzed. There were 2 texts from Ethan sitting quietly on my Snapchat. You only have a few scratches. Just get them bandaged and go home. Chloe still has a few tests to run. She's unfamiliar with this hospital, so I'm going to stay and help her out. I'll be home late. This was the first time Ethan had ever sent me such a long message. Yet every single word was about another woman. But right before I lost consciousness, I had clearly heard the doctor tell Chloe that all her vitals were perfectly normal, and she could go home. It was Ethan who insisted on paying out of pocket for a luxury private suite, just so she could be hospitalized. Just then, a nurse walked in with a billing statement. Mrs. Vance, given your condition, you need to stay in the hospital for at least a week. Could you please settle the initial deposit? I pulled out my phone to pay, only to remember that I had spent all my savings on the down payment for the new car Chloe was driving. Currently, my bank account balance was exactly $35. When we got the car, Ethan had claimed his money was locked in long-term investments. He asked me to pay first, promising he'd pay me back double later. He had also promised to be my personal chauffeur, so I'd never have to take a taxi in the rain again. Yet, since the day we bought that car, I hadn't ridden in it even once. Whenever I asked to drive it, he would make up various excuses. He said my driving skills were terrible, and that I would scratch it. But Chloe had only gotten her driver's license yesterday, and today, he had handed over my car to let her practice. My chest heaved violently as I fought down the raging fire in my chest. I dialed Ethan's number. Just like every other time over the past 5 years, it went straight to voicemail. The nurse stood there, holding the bill, looking at me with awkward pity. Left with no choice, I called Chloe. The call was answered almost instantly. Before I could even speak, I heard a faint rustling sound over the line, and in the next second, a familiar, icy male voice spoke. Ethan had snatched the phone away. I could clearly hear his footsteps as he walked away, deliberately distancing himself from Chloe. Then his lowered, angry hiss came through the speaker. Serena, I didn't think you could be this malicious. Using such a pathetic, low-life trick to harass Chloe just to make her feel guilty? I suggest you put away your petty jealousy. Your constant, unreasonable tantrums are only making me detest you more. Listening to his blind, unjust accusations, a wave of nausea washed over me. Ethan, I am in room 702, building 3. Come here and pay my hospital bill. You have 10 minutes. I paused, my voice cold and sharp as glass. If you aren't here in 10 minutes, I won't hesitate to tell Chloe everything. I could hear his heavy, furious breathing on the other end. Serena, do you always have to be this incredibly demanding? After a few seconds of tense silence, he spat out. Don't you dare bother Chloe. I'm coming. Less than 10 minutes later, the door to my hospital room was violently slammed open. Ethan stood there, his face clouded with residual rage, the air around him suffocatingly cold. He walked straight to the nurse, scanned the QR code, and paid the bill without a second thought. Looking down at the receipt, his brows knitted together in annoyance. What kind of tests did you even run? It's just a few scratches. Why does it cost this much? I lay on the bed, quietly staring at the man I had loved for 5 years, watching the very last drop of my affection dry up. I slowly looked up, my eyes dead. The baby is gone. I just had an emergency DNC. Ethan froze. A flicker of shock crossed his face, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. He didn't believe me at all. He assumed I was using the baby to gain sympathy. Serena, can you please stop lying about things like this? You really will do anything just to get my attention, won't you? It was probably just a tiny bit of spotting, and you insisted on getting hospitalized. Chloe's heart was acting up, and her condition was critical. I couldn't just abandon her. After all, she's been your best friend for 12 years. Seeing how his entire mind and soul were wrapped around another woman, I suddenly felt incredibly exhausted. Ethan, let's get a divorce. Since you think Chloe is so perfect, I'm stepping aside to let you two be together. Ethan's hand froze on the door handle. He turned around, staring at me with utter disbelief. What did you just say? I said I want a divorce. I pronounced every single word clearly, cold and resolute. Ethan stared at me for a long time, as if trying to figure out if I was bluffing. Suddenly, he let out a mocking laugh. Serena, do you seriously think this is funny? Who would even want a second-hand woman like you if you leave me? Is this all because I put you on silent? Are you seriously throwing a fit over this? Stop blaming me for everything. Look at yourself first. Every time I reply to one of your texts, you just keep spamming me. You want to share every single mundane detail of your day. Your love has become a suffocating burden. It's annoying. Do you have any idea how annoying you are? It felt as though 1,000 needles were piercing my heart, making it impossible to breathe. So, that was how he had viewed me all along. Seeing my silence, he assumed I had backed down. He delivered a cold, final warning. Lest you forget, your grandmother is only clinging to life because of the elite medical specialists I hired. I suggest you don't push my patience. My chest tightened violently, and the blood in my veins ran cold. Grandma Helen was my only living relative in this world. She was severely ill and bedridden, relying entirely on the top-tier medical team Ethan's connections had secured. Over the years, even though I had saved up and paid every single penny of her medical bills myself, never taking a dime from Ethan, I couldn't deny the fact that I could never have secured this elite medical network on my own. I couldn't risk her life. I didn't dare to. Seeing me go pale and speechless, triumph practically overflowed in Ethan's eyes. He reached out, casually tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Take back what you said about the divorce. Discharge yourself tomorrow morning. Go home and clean up the master bedroom. Chloe's emotional state has been very unstable. She'll be staying with us for a while, and I expect you to take good care of her. I lay on the bed, my eyes vacant and hopeless, and gave a numb nod. The next day, dragging my weak, aching body, I discharged myself and slowly crawled back to the house I had called home for 5 years. Enduring the physical agony, I quietly packed up all my belongings from the master bedroom and moved them, piece by piece, into the small, dark guest room. Around dusk, Ethan sent me a Snapchat. Make some of Chloe's favorite dishes. We're on our way back. For Grandma's sake, I did as I was told. Soon, Chloe walked in, delicately leaning on Ethan's arm. Looking at the table full of food, she put on her sweetest, most innocent act. Thank you so much, Serena. And I'm so sorry. I only just found out today that the person I hit yesterday was you. It's all Ethan's fault. He insisted I practice driving. He even said it was lucky that it was you, otherwise we would have had to pay a fortune in damages. An uneasy look flashed in Ethan's eyes. I was afraid you'd run your mouth, so I told Chloe beforehand. Besides, you only got a scratch. If it were anyone else, Chloe would be devastated right now. Hearing the warning in his voice, I merely gave a silent nod. The two of them sat side by side at the dining table, while I stood on the other side, looking like a complete stranger in my own home. Right as I turned to leave, Chloe suddenly clutched her chest and began coughing violently. Ethan rushed to her side, panic written all over his face. What's wrong, Chloe? You were fine just a second ago. Chloe looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. Serena, you know I am severely allergic to ginger. Why did you put ginger in the food? The moment she finished speaking, slap. A hard, ringing slap landed brutally on my face. The force was so immense that my lips split, and blood trickled down my chin. Ethan's eyes were filled with nothing but pure rage for Chloe. Serena, how can you be this evil? Chloe is already so weak, and you tried to poison her on purpose. Apologize to Chloe right now, and then we are going to the hospital. I gripped the edge of the dining table to keep myself upright. I didn't put any ginger in the food. If you don't believe me, go look in the kitchen yourself. There isn't even a piece of ginger skin in there. But in Ethan's eyes, my defense was nothing but shameless lying. He didn't even want to look at me. He whipped out his phone and dialed the private hospice center's number. As of this moment, terminate all medical care and treatments for Serena's grandmother. My eyes widened in absolute horror. The sheer shock drained all the strength from my legs, and I collapsed heavily to the floor. I crawled to Ethan's feet, desperately grabbing his trousers. Ethan, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please, I beg you, don't stop Grandma's treatment. Chloe, I'm sorry. It was all my fault. I'll kneel and beg, I'm so sorry. Ethan kicked me away without mercy. Now you know how to apologize? Too late. Without another glance, he scooped Chloe up in his arms and walked out, slamming the door. I ran like a madwoman to my grandmother's hospice care. But when I arrived, the doctor looked at me, shaking his head with sorrow. I'm so sorry, Ms. Vance. Because the private life support equipment was abruptly cut off, and the specialized medications were stopped, your grandmother suffered sudden cardiac arrest during the emergency transfer. She passed away 10 minutes ago. I stood frozen in the corridor. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. It was as if all the energy had been permanently drained from my body. I gently took Grandma's cold, withered hand. There was no warmth left in her palm. She would never gently stroke my head again. And she would never softly call me her sweet girl anymore. In just 2 days, I had lost my baby, and now my grandmother. Over the next few days, I lived like a walking corpse, quietly arranging my grandmother's funeral. Before I left, I placed the signed divorce papers on the kitchen island. I took one last look at the house I had lived in for 5 years, turned around, and walked away without a single shred of regret. On the other side of town, while Ethan was paying for Chloe's hospital discharge fees, a medical report slipped out of his coat pocket. He remembered he had casually shoved it in there when he paid my bill the other day. For some inexplicable reason, his heart began to race. As he unfolded the paper and read the words, he froze. The sterile corridor of the hospital VIP wing smelled faintly of bleach and lavender. Ethan Vance stood beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, holding the crumpled piece of paper that had slipped from his coat pocket. It was an official hospital pathology and surgical record. Patient name, Serena Vance. Diagnosis, severe abdominal trauma, acute uterine hemorrhage impending. Miscarriage 19 weeks. Procedure, emergency dilatation and curettage DNC, surgical removal of non-viable fetus. Surgeon notes. Patient presented with massive blood loss. Fetal heartbeat absent. Upon arrival, emergency intervention required to prevent maternal hemorrhagic shock. Legal guardian failed to respond to multiple emergency announcements. Patient signed self-consent under critical conditions. Ethan's thumb brushed over the bottom of the page, where Serena's signature was scrawled. The handwriting was erratic, shaky, and dragged across the line as if every stroke had been pulled out of her flesh with a rusted blade. His breath caught in his throat. The world around him seemed to tilt violently. No, this is impossible. Ethan? What's taking you so long? Chloe's sweet, delicate voice drifted from the private suite door. She was wearing a silk robe, holding a cup of warm water, her cheeks rosy and healthy. The doctor said I can leave now. Did you settle the valet fee? Ethan slowly turned his head. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, fixed on Chloe's face. Serena, he rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves scraping across concrete. Serena really lost the baby. Chloe's eyes flickered with a microsecond of annoyance before she instantly morphed her expression into one of deep, tearful sorrow. She rushed forward, reaching for his arm. Oh, Ethan, no. Poor Serena. She must have been so scared. But why? Didn't she tell us clearly? If I had known, I would have insisted she go into the ER first. She did tell us, Ethan whispered, the paper trembling violently in his fingers. She screamed it at the crash site. The paramedic told me she was hemorrhaging, and I told the medics her constitution was strong. Ethan, don't blame yourself. Chloe squeezed his hand tightly, resting her head against his chest. You were just worried about my heart condition. You didn't do it on purpose. Besides, Serena is young. You two can always have another baby. Ethan looked down at Chloe's face. For the very first time in 5 years, the sight of her tearful, helpless eyes didn't evoke a surge of protective instinct in his chest. Instead, a cold, unnatural chill crept up his spine. He pulled his arm out of her grip. Ethan? Chloe stumbled slightly, looking at him in genuine shock. Wait here. I'm going to check on her, Ethan said numbly. He turned and ran toward the elevator. He didn't wait for it, he took the stairs. 3 at a time, crashing through the emergency doors, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped animal. He ran to building 3, room 702. He threw the door open. Serena. The room was empty. The bed was stripped bare, the white sheets folded neatly at the foot. A cleaning worker was spraying disinfectant on the mattress. Where is the patient? Ethan grabbed the worker's shoulder, his voice cracking with hysteria. Where is my wife? The worker startled, shrinking back. The lady? She checked herself out this morning, paid her bill and left. Ethan pulled out his phone. His fingers shook so violently he almost dropped it. He dialed Serena's number. The number you have dialed is powered off or currently unavailable. Panic, real suffocating panic, completely unrelated to his supposed panic disorder, clutched at Ethan's throat. He turned around and sprinted out of the hospital toward his car. When Ethan pulled up to their suburban home, the sun was setting, casting long, blood-red shadows across the driveway. He unlocked the front door and shoved it open. Serena, I know you're angry, but we need to talk. The house was dead quiet. The air inside smelled faintly of bleach and floor cleaner, but the warmth that usually filled the living room was gone. Ethan rushed up the stairs to the master bedroom. The room was impeccably neat. Too neat. He pulled open the closet doors. Serena's half of the wardrobe was completely bare. Her shoes, her coats, her handbags vanished. He ran into the master bathroom. Her toothbrush, her face towels, her perfume gone. It was as if she had been systematically erased from the room. No, 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 Ethan muttered, pulling open the drawers, pulling out empty coat hangers. Then he remembered what he had demanded of her yesterday. Move your stuff to the guest room. Chloe will be staying in the master bedroom. He sprinted down the hall and kicked open the guest room door. A single, small suitcase sat on the floor open. Inside were a few old books and a frame with a photo of her grandmother. But Serena wasn't there. Ethan walked slowly back down to the kitchen. There, resting on the dark marble kitchen island, was a single manila folder. Beside the folder lay his gold wedding ring, which he had taken off months ago, claiming it gave him a skin rash. Ethan walked over, his legs feeling like lead. He opened the folder. At the top of the first page, in bold black ink, were the words, voluntary, dissolution of marriage agreement, divorce settlement. Serena's signature was already affixed at the bottom of the last page, accompanied by a bright red thumbprint. Attached to the agreement was a short, handwritten note. Ethan, I have waived all rights to your property, your assets, and your money. The down payment for the car Chloe drove has been logged as a personal debt owed to me. My attorney will contact you for recovery. Do not look for me. Do not call me. The child is gone. Grandma is gone. You and I no longer exist. Ethan stared at the words, Grandma is gone. His brow furrowed in confusion. Grandma? What does she mean grandma is gone? A terrible, sickening thought began to bloom in the dark corners of his mind. He pulled out his phone and dialed the director of the private hospice center, the one he had called yesterday to order the immediate termination of Grandma Helen's medical care. The call connected on the second ring. Director Vance, Ethan said, his voice flat, emotionless. About the patient. Helen Miller. I called yesterday to pause her treatment. I want to reinstate it immediately. Send her back to the VIP ward. There was a long, uncomfortable silence on the other end of the line. Director Vance. The hospice director spoke softly, his tone dripping with cautious hesitation. Did Mrs. Vance not inform you? Inform me of what? Ethan yelled into the receiver. Patient Helen Miller passed away yesterday evening at 6:42 p.m., the director said gently, following your explicit verbal instructions to terminate life support equipment and specialized cardiac medications. The patient suffered acute cardiac arrest during the transfer to the public ward. Resuscitation efforts failed. Boom. It felt as though a thunderbolt had struck Ethan straight through the skull. The phone slipped from his hand, crashing against the marble island before bouncing onto the floor. He stood in the middle of his quiet, pristine kitchen, his eyes staring blankly at the wall. Ethan, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please, I beg you, don't stop Grandma's treatment. Chloe, I'm sorry. It was all my fault. I'll kneel and beg. I'm so sorry. He remembered her crawling on the floor, grabbing his trousers, her face stained with blood and tears. He remembered kicking her away without a second thought, scorning her apologies as manipulative theater. He hadn't just ignored his wife. He had killed her child, denied her medical care, and signed her grandmother's death warrant, all in the span of 48 hours. For the next 3 days, Ethan lived like a ghost inside the empty house. He didn't go to work. He didn't answer calls from his board of directors. He sat on the floor of the guest room, holding the divorce papers, staring at the space where Serena's suitcase used to be. His phone buzzed constantly. It was Chloe. Ethan, where are you? My chest hurts again. Ethan, the landlord at my old apartment is kicking me out. When can I move into your master bedroom? Ethan, please answer me. I'm scared. In the past, a single text like this would have sent Ethan running across the city, abandoning meetings, anniversaries, and emergencies alike. Now, looking at her name flashing on his screen, Ethan felt a deep, terrifying wave of disgust. He finally picked up the phone. What? Ethan. Chloe's voice was sweet, trembling, needy. Where have you been? I've been waiting at the hospital for hours. My heart feels so weak. Chloe, Ethan said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Which heart condition do you have again? What? Chloe blinked on the other end. You know, my congenital septal defect. The doctor said I can't be stressed. I checked your medical records yesterday, Ethan said quietly, standing up from the floor. I used my authority as a senior director to pull your full health history from the central database. The line went dead silent. There is no congenital heart condition, Chloe, Ethan continued, his tone hollow. No septal defect. No arrhythmia. The only thing in your file is a mild case of iron deficiency anemia from 3 years ago. Ethan, listen to me, I can explain. And the car crash. Ethan cut her off, walking toward the garage. I pulled the city traffic camera footage from the intersection. His voice began to shake, anger finally cracking through his numb exterior. You weren't hit, Chloe. You ran a red light while looking down at your phone, cruising at 50 miles an hour, and slammed straight into the side of the taxi Serena was riding in. You caused the crash. Ethan, I didn't mean to. Chloe cried out, her sweet voice turning sharp and frantic. I was distracted. I was texting you. I panicked. I didn't know it was Serena's taxi. And when you got out of the car, Ethan growled, his knuckles turning white as he grabbed the steering wheel of his car. You didn't call 911. You called me. You lied to me. You pretended your heart was failing so I would ignore the woman bleeding to death in the backseat. She didn't die. Chloe shrieked through the speaker, dropping her innocent act completely. She just lost a baby. Ethan, why are you doing this to me? You loved me. You always chose me over her. You put her on mute for 5 years. Because of me. You can't blame me now just because you feel guilty. You put her on mute for 5 years because of me. The words stabbed straight into Ethan's brain like an ice pick. He hung up the phone and threw it onto the passenger seat. He drove straight to the city's central cemetery. The cemetery was quiet, covered in a light drizzle. Ethan walked through the rows of marble tombstones until he found the newest plot in the senior memorial garden. A fresh granite headstone stood there, polished and cold. Helen Miller, beloved grandmother. Rest in peace. Beside the large headstone was a tiny, unmarked marble urn, buried under a mound of fresh white lilies. Ethan stopped 10 feet away. Standing beside the grave was a figure in a tailored black coat, holding a black umbrella. It was Serena. She looked thinner than before, her face pale, but her posture was straight, unbroken. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her eyes, as she looked down at the flowers, were completely calm. There were no tears on her face. No anger. No agony. Just a vast, impenetrable sea of quiet. Ethan's breath hitched. He stepped forward, his shoes crunching against the wet gravel. Serena. Serena didn't startle. She didn't jump. She slowly turned her head, her dark eyes meeting his. There was no hatred in her gaze. There was no resentment. Looking into her eyes, Ethan realized something far worse than hatred. He had become a total stranger to her. Serena. Ethan choked out, falling to his knees right there in the mud before her grandmother's grave. I'm sorry. Serena, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know about the baby. I didn't know about Grandma. Serena looked down at the man kneeling in the dirt. 5 years ago, she would have dropped to her knees beside him, cupped his face, and wiped his tears away. She would have blamed herself for making him cry. Now, she simply held her umbrella steady, watching him like a scientist, observing a specimen under a microscope. You knew, Serena said quietly. Her voice was smooth, clear, and carried easily over the sound of the rain. You knew I was in the back seat of that taxi, Ethan. You knew I was bleeding. The paramedic told you I was having a miscarriage. You knew Grandma was in critical care. I thought you were exaggerating. Ethan sobbed, reaching out to grab the hem of her black coat. You always wanted my attention. I thought you were just trying to pull me away from Chloe. Serena stepped back, easily out of his reach. Yes, she said with a soft, bitter smile. I spent 5 years begging for your attention. I cried, I fought, I bargained. I convinced myself that your panic disorder was real, that you truly couldn't handle the sound of a phone ringing. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket. She tapped the screen and held it out toward him. The screen showed a recorded video file. In the video, taken from the dashcam of her wrecked taxi, Ethan could clearly be seen arriving at the crash site. His phone was ringing in his hand, playing a loud custom ringtone, and he answered it instantly without a single tremor, without a single heart palpitation, his voice warm and soothing as he spoke to Chloe. You didn't have a panic disorder, Ethan, Serena said softly. You just didn't love me. My voice was a nuisance to you. My pain was an inconvenience. My existence was a burden. Ethan stared at the screen, his face turning deathly pale. Serena, please, give me a chance to make it up to you. I've cut ties with Chloe. I'll give you everything. My money, my houses, my company shares. Just come back. Serena lowered her phone and placed it back in her pocket. The divorce papers are on the kitchen island, she said. My attorney, Mr. Harrison, will serve you with the formal property division and corporate recovery papers tomorrow. Recovery? Ethan blinked through his tears. The money I spent on Grandma's medical bills over the years, which you claimed was covered by your connections, was paid from my personal account, Serena said. Evenly. The $80,000 down payment for the car Chloe drove was paid from my savings. The court will order full restitution. She turned, holding her umbrella, and began to walk away down the gravel path. Serena. Wait. Ethan scrambled up from the mud, chasing after her. What about us? 5 years. We were together for 5 years. Serena paused. She didn't turn around. Ethan, she said, her voice dropping into a quiet, final register. The Serena who loved you died in the back seat of that taxi while you were escorting your mistress to a private suite. Do not ever contact me again. In the weeks that followed, Ethan Vance's world fell apart with terrifying speed. Serena did not launch a dramatic, screaming war against him. She did not post angry messages on social media or make a scene at his corporate office. She simply handed everything over to the law. Within 10 days. 1. The traffic investigation. Serena provided the police with full dashcam footage and her medical reports from the crash. The city prosecutor formally filed criminal charges against Chloe Miller for reckless driving causing severe bodily harm and vehicular endangerment, resulting in fetal fatality. 2. The fraud investigation. When the police audited Chloe's statements, they discovered she had lied about her medical condition to evade immediate sobriety tests and field questioning at the scene. Furthermore, Ethan's attempt to use hospital priority services for a non-emergency patient triggered an internal ethics review by the hospital board. 3. The corporate fallout. Ethan's position as senior vice president of his firm was suspended pending the ethics investigation. The board of directors, terrified of public scandal, forced him into an indefinite, unpaid leave. Chloe Miller was arrested at her rented apartment. When the officers handcuffed her, she screamed, wept, and tried to call Ethan 50 times in a row. Ethan never answered. His phone sat on the marble kitchen island of his empty house, buzzing constantly. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Every time the screen lit up with a notification, Ethan's heart would leap into his throat. He would sprint across the room, desperate to see Serena's name. It was never Serena. It was his lawyers. It was the police. It was Chloe's hysterical family begging him to post her bail. It was his company demanding his resignation. He sat on the cold floor of the living room, surrounded by empty liquor bottles, looking at the spot where Serena used to sit reading her books. He tried to text her. Serena, the police arrested Chloe today. She's going to prison. Are you happy? Now, will you come home? A system error immediately popped up beneath his message. Message failed to deliver. The recipient has blocked your number or the account no longer exists. She hadn't just put him on silent. She had erased him. 1 year later, the city's higher family court was quiet on a Tuesday morning. Serena walked out of the heavy glass doors, wearing an elegant gray pantsuit, her hair glowing under the autumn sun. Beside her was her attorney, Mr. Harrison. The judge signed the final decree, Ms. Miller, Mr. Harrison said with a professional smile, handing her a blue folder. The divorce is official. All financial restitution from Mr. Vance's frozen accounts has been successfully transferred to your personal trust. Thank you, David, Serena said softly. She looked up at the clear sky. Over the past year, she had used her recovered funds to establish a nonprofit foundation named the Helen and Baby Memorial Fund, providing emergency financial support and legal protection for pregnant women in low-income medical emergencies. She was whole. She was free. As she stepped down the court stairs, a disheveled, hollow-eyed man stepped out from behind a stone pillar. It was Ethan. He looked unrecognizable. His hair was streaked with gray, his designer suit was crumpled and ill-fitting, and his eyes were sunken, surrounded by dark, bruised circles. Following the public scandal, his company had fired him, his reputation in the financial sector was destroyed, and he had spent the last 6 months selling off his assets to pay for legal fees and court-ordered restitution. Serena. He rasped, taking a hesitant step toward her. Mr. Harrison immediately stepped in front of Serena, but she gently raised a hand, stopping her attorney. She looked at Ethan. There was no hatred in her face, only a quiet, cool distance. Is there something else, Mr. Vance? She asked. Ethan's lips trembled. He pulled a small, worn velvet box from his pocket, the wedding ring she had left on the kitchen island a year ago. Serena. I sold the house, Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. I sold the cars. I paid everything back. I'm going away, to a small town up north. He looked at her with pathetic, desperate eyes. Can you just tell me one thing? In those 5 years, did you ever truly believe that I loved you? Serena looked at the velvet box in his hand. Then, she pulled her own phone from her purse. She tapped the screen, unmuted her speaker, and looked him straight in the eyes. No, Ethan, she said, her voice clear and carrying over the quiet courtyard. I knew you didn't love me, but I loved myself too little to leave. She stepped past him, her heels clicking crisply against the marble steps. I don't make that mistake anymore. As she walked toward her car, Ethan stood frozen on the steps. Suddenly, a loud, sharp ringing sound echoed through the courtyard. Ring, ring, ring. It was Ethan's phone, sitting in his coat pocket. An automated telemarketer, or a collection agency. Ethan reached into his pocket with trembling hands. He pulled the phone out. He looked at the screen. His hands began to shake violently. His chest heaved as a sudden, genuine wave of suffocating panic hit him. A real, terrifying panic attack brought on by the sudden, crushing weight of his absolute solitude. He collapsed onto the marble steps, clutching his chest, the phone ringing loudly in his palm. Ring, ring, ring. People walked past him, casting uncomfortable, pitying glances, but no one stopped. No one reached out to comfort him. No one wiped his tears. In the distance, Serena's car pulled smoothly into the main street, blending into the bright afternoon sun, leaving the sound of the ringing phone far, far behind.